there's a situation now where there's a lot of jockeying for that, and Vance is certainly the most prominent since he's the vice president, and therefore the number two. But there's a lot of other folks that can rise to that level. Depending on events, Marco Rubio, the current Secretary of State and former Florida senator, is the most prominent. But in the next few months, the person that's going to have more to do with Trump's success, and they have to succeed on both the tax bill and on these trade negotiations. So the person that has the most to do with that than anyone is the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. He's basically got the future of Trump and the MAGA future in his hands right now, at least for the next few months.
Hello and welcome to the Trump Report. I'm Louis Sykes. Today we're joined by Terry Haines, founder of Pangea Policy, which delivers award-winning macro policy and political forecasting. Terry, thank you very much for joining me today.
Louis, my pleasure. Thank you for having me again.
Well, Terry, Trump says he's done it. He's got a big deal with China, 55, I think, roughly % tariffs. He's got his rare earths. Has Trump just saved the US economy?
Well, he's in the process of doing it, of course. That's what the White House will tell you. The bottom line here is, and let me say as a caveat, we're talking just before there's a lot more exposition I expect to come from both China and the United States today. So we're speaking at a time where not every detail is known or may be known, but. What this is a deal. It's important in a variety of ways, not least of which continued Western access to rare earths is important for the economy broadly. But at the same time, looked at from the perspective of the panoply of issues, the broader horizon of issues, both in trade and geopolitically, that the United States and China are competing over, to use that euphemism. This is a very small deal, and it took a meeting in Geneva that then resulted in a supposed misunderstanding that involved a bunch of chain pulling from both parties to come up with yet another meeting at Lancaster House in London to come up with something that hopefully is final and allows things to go forward. So this is an indication of a lot of things. It's an indication of the United States and China to want to work together when it's needed and horse trade where it's needed. It's also an indication of just how broad the issues are on trade and in geopolitics, and just how little. How small the possibility is that those are going to get dealt with in a constructive way.
So what's Trump going to see as his big wins on this deal, and what's he going to want to try and keep out of our eyes on what he's agreed so far with China?
Well, the rare earths is obviously a big win, and to use the old Reagan phrase, they're going to have to trust but verify. And Trump saying that he and Xi Jinping are both going to have to sign off on this deal, and he's used the word signatures more than once, may indicate some sort of formalized document. It may not. He may just be misspeaking or overspeaking a little bit. But I'd watch out for exactly what form the deal takes, firstly. Secondly, Trump says that the rare earths not only will be provided, but they'll be front-loaded. That'll be the first part of the deal. The question is, what else is involved other than the continued access by Chinese students to United States universities, which is an explicit part of this deal from the Trump perspective. I'd be watching out to see what sort of access to chips China might get, because that's something they very much wanted. And beyond that, I think we're in the realm of the unknown, not the unspeculated upon. We can speculate all day. But China will have gotten some things out of this. It is not clear right now exactly what those things are. So what you're looking at is think of it as a constructive standoff, and that's good enough. But if financial markets and political people alike think this is some sort of a major breakthrough, everything I just described to get to this major breakthrough indicates that it's actually not. And that will continue on uh, in this environment of certain uncertainty for the foreseeable future.
So is this at least a step in the right direction then, or are we still really just at square one, the first part of figuring out how they're going to do these negotiations?
Oh, sure, it's a positive step. But of course, I mean, any time that it's the right question to ask. But any time that there's agreement on anything that results in uh, you know the continued lubrication of commerce, then that's a good thing, by all means. But all I'm suggesting is that nobody should oversell this. I'm seeing words in the press right now, like breakthrough and de-escalation. I think to think this is some sort of a broad breakthrough, or that this symbolizes de-escalation between the two countries, I think is completely missing the broader picture here, both in a trade sense and the geopolitical sense that frankly underpins trade, because it needs to be remembered that the reason why trade is in the crosshairs is because it is a tool in the broader geopolitical competition between the United States and China.
And I was reading through some of your recent analysis of what's going on in these deals. You noted that there's some signs, perhaps, that neither side really wants a solution to this at this point, or maybe going into the future.
I think both. Let's put it this way. I think both sides are kind of marshaling their forces in the competition as it comes into full flower. China is not a bit interested in any sort of deal that involves bobtailing it on geopolitical freedom of movement. And I think what you see in the past week or so is a signal in that direction. You see Russia getting more aggressive, in part trying to figure out a response to the Ukrainian drone attacks into its heartland, but also just because it's keeping the war hot and moving. You see at the same time Iran getting more aggressive on a nuclear deal. President Trump saying this morning, United States time, that he was less optimistic about the prospects of getting a deal done there. Iran getting more aggressive is another sign. What do both of those have in common? Those are both China client states. It's a mistake to think about Russia as as a free actor here, and sort of the same with Iran. So the signal from the geopolitics is not a positive sign, regardless of what you think from the trade side. On the United States side, what you have is a strategy that involves at least two legs of a stool right now. One is getting this tax bill finished, a major tax bill that Trump calls the one big beautiful bill, and that is designed to essentially put the United States on the most aggressive growth trajectory going forward, to strengthen its economy at a time when the rest of the world is certainly less strong, including China. And secondly, the United States is trying to conclude lots of major bilateral trade deals. One announced recently with the United Kingdom that is intended, as your ambassador, Lord Mandelson, says, is intended as the first step of many in a broader trade relationship. So many allies, and also many unaligneds, like prominently India, where we could probably expect a deal by next month. So, the way I look at this is geopolitically, what the United States is trying to do is trying to create as many interdependent economic alliances as possible, essentially to create stronger and broader alliances, and not incidentally to ring fence China economically.
And some of that not so positive news on the world stage is being reflected elsewhere. The World Bank has downgraded its global forecast. I believe that's down 0.4 points to 2.3% for the year. What does that actually mean for the rest of us in practice?
Well, I think it means a little less for the United States. It means a lot more for the rest of the world. One of the things it tells you from the United States government's perspective is that its calculus on both China's relative weakness and the economic stagnation in the rest of the world provides a good opportunity for the United States to conclude trade deals that lower tariffs and open markets to American products. And so the White House certainly will take the World Bank forecast as confirming what it's doing, both on the trade side and on putting pressure on China, because one of the lines that has been consistent out of the Trump administration for the last 3 months, said particularly often by his Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, is that China's current economic course is unsustainable in the long term. So the United States sees opportunities not just to put pressure on China through the broader economics, but also be in a situation where potentially broader trade deals could be concluded and geopolitical deals concluded when China figures out that its current stance isn't worth the candle, again, from an American government perspective.
Mm-hmm. And so from where we're looking at it today, there's maybe a China that's less interested in concluding a deal yet. There's some bad news from some of China's client states, as you've said.
Mm-hmm.
Should we be worried about that figure getting lower as this goes on?
It is dependent on a lot of things, and lest that sound like a cop out, it is. I don't mean it to. It's dependent on a lot of things, but one of the things it's dependent upon is whether or not China moderates its current desire to want to export its way out of this, and even the exports have geopolitical and economic tones and purposes. For example, you have a situation where something that people in the United Kingdom and in Europe know well, the aggressive export by China of electric vehicles is meant for a lot of reasons. One is to bolster its own economy, but another is that it will assist in the withering away of the industrial base in the UK and the EU if successful. So both the UK and the EU are grappling with just how much to permit the importation of Chinese electric vehicles, for example. But if China decides that its export strategy isn't working, and then it may well change that. And it may change that in ways that allow greater domestic production and consumption, which is something that is very much wanted from an economic perspective. The other question is what steps China can take to try to remove the stigma that exists in markets today about China being uninvestable. And China's done an awful lot to deserve that tag from a Western perspective. From basically stealing intellectual property all the way to not permitting Western accounting firms access. So what you have is a world where Chinese companies, Chinese investments are very opaque, and companies find it increasingly hard to trust what they get out of China. And that combined with the idea that the most of the purportedly private economic activity in China is state directed or state enabled, means that there's a situation where the statist tone of China's economic world is also holding it down, and if it changes that tune to make itself more investable, it can help dig out of the current hole that it's in.
And on the other side of that, does any of this trade talk or anything that's been agreed today help the US get away from some of those fears that there could be a US economic recession?
Well, yeah, I think so. I think the rare earth situation is clearly a win in that regard. And again, assuming that there isn't some other hiccup with it. And since we didn't think there was one after Geneva, and there might well be another. Who knows? But both parties claim to have this nailed down. So let's assume that they do. Yeah, that's a big one. Number one. Number two, the tax bill and the growth that results from that, even though it may or may not be the 4% the administration thinks is possible, but growth will certainly help. Making the tax cuts permanent certainly helps. Providing more stimulus and more incentive for manufacturing companies of all kinds to reshore, rehome, particularly ones in the United States defense industrial base, which are very important. And you can see the precursor to this in the steel deal that resulted in Japan's Nippon Steel investing in America's United States Steel with some U.S. government guidance, which I think is underappreciated, but a clear signal that just as the U.K. government is grappling with in British Steel, a clear indication that neither the Trump government in the United States nor the Starmer government in the United Kingdom is prepared to have a world where the basics of a defense industrial base don't exist in their home countries.
And Trump has always had this kind of two sides on his tariff policy. On the one hand, they're a short-term weapon to get China and others to trade in a way that Trump and the US see as being more fair. On the other hand, and especially during his campaign, he was saying, no, it's the US government is going back to collecting revenue from tariffs, and it'll help us collect less revenue from income tax. If today he's saying he is going to stick with 55%, does that suggest it's the latter? They want to keep collecting revenue from tariffs increasingly?
Well, I suggest to people only that both can be true. The purpose of tariff policy in a perfect world, which this assuredly is not, is to have zero tariffs on both sides. And that's the United States government's view. And the reason why it's the United States government's view is because it wagers that benefits American industry, American goods, American services the most. So in that sense, it's an America First policy. But the idea is essentially, use tariffs as a wedge to get people at a negotiating table with the idea that trade on both sides is freed up. And I think you saw the beginnings of that in what's been agreed to by the U.S. and U.K. so far. And I expect you'll see it in others. Now, because it's not a perfect world, the Treasury Secretary Bessent has what he calls, or what I call, the choice. The choice is essentially, if you want to trade with the United States increasingly, then we can negotiate, we can lower tariffs mutually, and we'll all win. On the other hand, if you choose to keep your tariff barriers up, well, that's fine. We will have tariff barriers that are comparable to yours now, whereas we didn't used to have. And in situations like that, which will occur, in situations like that, the United States will take in tariff revenue, and that tariff revenue will be in the billions and even trillions of dollars in out years. And so, there will be a situation where, it's not going to be just all of one thing or all of another. The United States will have very low tariff barriers with allies and major unaligneds, but in a situation where the other country chooses, Bessent's choice, the other country chooses to be protectionist, well, then so will the United States. So there is revenue that will come in, but it's also important to understand, and this has bubbled up in markets over the last few days. There are new concerns expressed by some that what Trump's really up to is keeping tariffs as high as possible, and that's really what they want, because they want the revenue to cover whatever deficit increases exist from the tax bill. That's not the case. Not only in a technical sense can you not count the tariff revenue as offsetting the making permanent the tax, the lower tax barriers, because it's frankly too it's not reliable enough. It's not reliable enough to say that in this year we're going to have so much tariff revenue come in, because it will vary greatly, and it will vary based on all these negotiations. So there's that, number one. But number two, what people bandy around, frankly, is the idea that tariffs alone are going to raise in the billions and trillions of dollars. And there are lots of estimates to show that. The irony of that is that's a static, those are static estimates. based solely on the fiction that the tariff barriers remain what they are today or more, when we all know logically that they won't, because the United States is negotiating to lower them. So that sounds a little Byzantine, and I apologize for that. But that's really what's going on here. But the basic desire of the United States government is to lower or even eliminate tariffs wherever they can get the other country to agree to do the same.
So at the heart of that, then, Terry, Trump can't just tariff his way out of any economic trouble that comes out of concerns over spending, or on the other side of that, a slowdown in global trade.
No, I don't think so. I think that would have a very bad economic effect on the United States, number one. Number two, I think it would have a very bad political effect. The Republican majorities in the Congress today are willing to go along with Trump on tariffs, with the proviso that what Trump is doing is actually trying to lower those tariff barriers through agreements. They're on board with that. They most certainly are not on board in a world where the tariff barriers remain high, because the amount of economic disruption to the United States generally and their own states, senators, districts, congressmen, and women, would be severe, and politically alone, I think that they would not stand for that.
So where does all of this and where are we on Trump's big beautiful bill, as we've been discussing here? And I think at the heart of the issue around that is, how much does Trump differ from traditional Republicans on the idea of national debt?
I think what they see is that, I think the way they look at this, and these are my words, nobody's in the White House, is they see the traditional concerns about debt and deficit as being very much 20th century debates. The existential problem for the United States is not debt and deficit all by itself. The existential problem for the United States today is debt service. And we now live in a world, as of last year, where the largest spending category for the United States is debt service. And the prominent British economist Neil Ferguson calls this Ferguson's Law. And Ferguson's Law is essentially that any country that has debt service, historically, that has debt service as its number one category, is not going to remain a great power for very long. What they are focused on, and you will hear this come up sometimes in discussions from Trump and from House and Senate leaders, but it's by no means in the main talking points. But what they're fundamentally concerned about is trying to work on a world where debt service is no longer that number one category, and they get debt and deficit stabilized over time. Treasury Secretary Bessent said in an interview sometime within the last week or so that their view was, and this goes along with Trump's mantra about creating large amounts of growth to grow your way out of this, at least in part. Their view is, look, Rome wasn't made in a day, and this problem won't be solved in a day. But what we intend to do is use not only the tax bill, but also spending the spending bills that come annually and other means to actually reduce the debt and deficit enough that by 2028, when the president's term ends, the country will be in much better shape than it is today. So that is a plea for patience and for resolve after the tax bill gets done, essentially. And that's how they plan to look at it. And that's a very tough row to hoe, as you can see already. But I think they will try their best to make some corresponding cuts and try to figure out ways, and I think particularly after the 2026 midterms, figure out some ways in which more efficiencies can be wrung out of the federal government to reassure markets that the United States debt and deficit and debt service are on the right track. They also see themselves as having no alternative, frankly. I mean, in the U.S.-China competition, the last thing you would want to do, and then in this, I think Trump chimes with, say, Ronald Reagan very directly. The last thing you would want to do is hamstring your economy or put crushing tax burdens back on the public just at a time when we need to be turbocharging things because, as even the World Bank points out, the United States is essentially an outlier in a world that is either economically stagnant or worse.
So, how confident should Trump feel then that he can get the support he needs at the moment to get his big bill through?
Oh, I think I think he should feel fairly confident. I think today I have it at 85% likely that the bill is done by our Independence Day, July 4, and if not, then it will be done by the end of July or the beginning of August, when the Congress traditionally goes on recess. Not just because of that backstop for recess, which is always motivational for people, but also because what we can expect is that the United States will bump up against its debt ceiling or debt limit, and that will need to be either raised or suspended for a period of time. But that tends to galvanize the specter of possibly not or possibly having to default on United States obligations tends to concentrate minds and motivate people to reach final deals. So, I would expect things to happen in that general time frame. And now I'm just talking about sort of primarily 3 weeks to the next month, and if not, then several weeks past that.
And perhaps one of Trump's tax bill's most vocal opponents, Elon Musk, has now said he might have gone too far. Is there a sign there he's coming in from the cold, or do you think that's it for Elon on Capitol Hill?
My view, Musk is kind of a welcome fellow traveler by Republican standards, but it shouldn't be forgotten that the core of Trump's support, the so-called MAGA movement, was all about Trump and is all about Trump well before Musk joined in last summer. Musk has repented, as you mentioned, publicly. I expect he's done more repenting in private, both because he knows he went too far and because the health of many of his companies depends on government contracts that could very easily be taken away by the government. That wouldn't be difficult at all to do, particularly if the government had a concern about future performance of companies with CEOs that may not be all there, to put it mildly. So there's that, but Musk has a choice now. And, you look at the movie The Godfather, right? He used to be Sonny. If he had some discipline, he might be Michael. But he's now on his way to either Fredo or the poor son-in-law Carlo that gets offed. Connie's husband that gets offed in the end. He doesn't want to be Carlo. He may have to be Fredo for a while before he gets back in the good graces of anybody. But his influence, which I always thought was overblown to begin with, is now very, very much diminished in Washington.
So it's all been pretty bad news then for SpaceX, Tesla, and many other Musk companies that are on government contracts.
Well, you can look at the basic market performance, and the more he repents publicly, the better the markets feel, and that's probably all you need to know about that.
Well, just to finish, Terry, writing for The Times today, Katie Balls has said that J.D. Vance is the big winner of the Musk-Trump fallout. Who of those men would you be listening to now to get a better judge of the future direction of the MAGA movement and the White House team?
Oh, I would take, Vance very much wants to be the next generation. He's going to have some competition for that. I think that I don't disagree with Katie's judgment. I do think it's premature, though. There's a situation where and I did read her piece. There's a situation now where there's a lot of jockeying for that, and Vance is certainly the most prominent since he's the vice president, and therefore the number two. But there's a lot of other folks that can rise to that level, depending on events. Marco Rubio, the current Secretary of State and former Florida senator, is the most prominent. But in the next few months, the person that's going to have more to do with Trump's success, and they have to succeed, on both the tax bill and on these trade negotiations. So the person that has the most to do with that than anyone is the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. He's basically got the the future of Trump and the MAGA future in his hands right now, at least for the next few months.
Well, Terry Haines, founder of Pangea Policy, thank you very much for joining me today on the Trump Report.
Thank you, Louis. Really appreciate it. Always enjoy it.
Thanks for watching the Trump Report with me, Louis Sykes, and today, Terry Haines, founder of Pangea Policy. Remember, if you don't want to watch us in full on YouTube, you can always go over to Spotify or anywhere else you get your podcasts and listen to the full interview with Terry on there. Or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel to keep updated on this, listen to the Times Radio, or go and read the latest news and updates on thetimes.com. Thanks for watching.